When I was a kid, I'd come home from school and walk into the house that was always clean, always organized, and my mom would have rearranged my bedroom, furniture moved, everything tidy, and I'd have to ask her for days where my stuff was. I'd find her in the kitchen making cheese straws or baking something, and this was just the normal everyday, and I loved it. Though I never really thought much about it at the time, looking back, I can see that it brought comfort, safety, and familiarity. My Nan lived with us too, in the bottom suite of the house. And she taught me things, though not always in the way I expected. I remember one day I was trying to make pastry. I'd made things like this many times before, so I thought, I know what I'm doing. I put all the dry ingredients into the bowl, but then I got stuck. How do you make it all come together? How do you make it stick? So I went downstairs to my Nan, who was prepping dinner in the kitchen, and I told her what I've done. And she gave me this really confused look. What stick? She asked. What do you mean? And I explained, and she smiled, this little smirk, and she said, you need to add water. Just a little. Mix it together. If it's still dry, add a little more. And if it ends up being too wet, add a little more flour. And that was it. It was simple. Add water. And I felt really silly for not remembering, but I'd never forgotten that moment. Not because of the water, though I use that knowledge every time I make pastry now, but because of the way she taught me. No judgment, no making me feel stupid, just here's what you need to know. That's what I want to talk about today, because somewhere along the way, we've started to forget something important. Women in the home matter. The spaces we create, the rhythms we tend, the knowledge we pass down, it's not just nice, it's essential. So let me take you back, like way back. Imagine you're living in an ancestral community thousands of years ago. There's no electricity, no convenience, no shortcuts. The home, whether it's a cave, a hut, a gathering space, is everything. It's where food is prepped, where children are raised, where knowledge is passed down, where community happens. And the woman? She's not on the sidelines. She's central. She's the one who knows which plants are edible, which roots can heal. She's managing the food, preserving it, preparing it, rationing it through the seasons. She's teaching the children. She's making decisions about the community. And in many cultures, she's the one that holds the wealth, the land, and the inheritance. She's not doing this because she has no choice. She's doing this because it matters, because the survival and thriving of her family and community depends on her knowledge, her skill, and her presence. Everyone knew this. There was no question about whether her work had value. It was obvious. Without her, the community didn't survive. Now, if we fast forward through history, through ancient civilizations, through medieval times, through the Renaissance, the specifics change, but the core remains. Women are the keepers of the home, and the home is where life happens. Then something changed. Gradually at first, then all at once. The Industrial Revolution happened. Factories opened. Suddenly there was work outside the home, work that paid money, work that was visible, measurable, valued in a particular way. But women didn't immediately leave the home. For a long time, the home remained the woman's domain. She was still the center, and she was still managing everything. So what changed, and what made us want to work? Well, the world was changing. 2 world wars had happened. Women were needed in factories while men were at war. We proved we could do the work. We got a taste of independence, of earning our own money, of being valued in a different way. And then, even after the wars ended, something had shifted in how we saw ourselves. We started asking, why should we only be at home? Why can't we have careers? Why can't we have choices? And those are good questions. Having choices is important. Having opportunity is important. As more women moved into the workforce, time became limited. We were working full-time and expected to manage the home. We were stretched thin. Washing machines, canned goods, pre-made bread, frozen dinners. These weren't just nice to have. They became necessary. Because how else could a woman work all day and still come home and feed her family? Even with help from husbands and kids, even with additional support, there simply wasn't enough time to do it all the old way. So we adapted. We used shortcuts. We bought convenience. And for a while it worked, and we managed and we juggled. And stepping away from those traditional rhythms of homemaking and outsourcing and convenienceifying everything, we started to lose something. We started to lose the skills, the knowledge, the understanding of how to cook from scratch, how to preserve food, and how to manage a household with intention. We were so focused on managing both roles that we forgot what we were actually losing. By the time we get to now, something shifted. Women are working full time and expecting to manage the home. We're juggling everything. We're told we can have it all: the career, the perfect home, the kids, the body, the social media, all of it perfectly balanced. And when we can't, when we're exhausted and burned out and something has to give, we blame ourselves. What we've lost isn't just time. We've lost presence, we've lost connection, we've lost the rhythms that hold families together, and the impact of that is real. Kids are eating in their rooms now. Families don't sit at the table together. Studies show that children who don't eat regular family meals are more likely to struggle with anxiety, depression, and behavioral issues. They're also less likely to develop healthy relationships with food and their bodies. And the screen time? Kids are spending hours a day on devices instead of learning how to be in a relationship with real people. We're raising a generation that doesn't know how to have a conversation without a screen. Parents are working so hard to provide, they're not actually present with their kids. And the mental health crisis we're seeing is not a coincidence. Loneliness is at an all-time high. Anxiety and depression rates have skyrocketed, especially in women. We're burnt out, disconnected, and we're passing that down to our kids. The kids are growing up not knowing how to cook, how to care for our home, how to manage their own lives. They don't have the skills their grandparents had. They don't know how to preserve the food, how to plan a meal, how to create order in a space. And when they leave home, they're lost. They're dependent on convenience, on takeout, on systems that keep them disconnected from the basics of survival. When you remove women from the center of the home and family, when you tell her that work is what matters and home is what you do in your spare time, when you make convenience the priority over connection, something breaks. The glue that holds families together starts to dissolve. Divorce rates have climbed, family bonds are fractured, kids are growing up without the stability and presence they need, and we're all wondering why we feel so alone, so anxious, and so lost. I grew up in a traditional home, but it wasn't what you might think. My mom was there, yes, and she kept the house organized, and she was in the kitchen. She did all the housewifey things. But she also worked. As I got older, she worked more. Bills needed to be paid, and life was starting to get expensive. So I grew up watching my mom do both. She managed the home and she worked. And I always saw myself taking on a similar role for when I grew up. I'm naturally entrepreneurial, and I've always been busy working. I started businesses, I worked with top clients, and I was always lucky in some ways as I was able to include my kids in some of what I was doing. But eventually, I couldn't manage it anymore. Growing a business and growing a family were two very different worlds. I didn't know how to do it all, and there weren't enough hours in the day, and I felt like I was failing at both things. Eventually, as you know, we moved to the farm. And I still worked, but at this point, my husband didn't. We homeschooled the kids, although they also did end up going to school, but we had a bit more freedom. It felt like we were finally breathing. My husband had to pick up what I wasn't doing around the house because of work. And here's what I noticed. He wasn't as good at it as I am. Not because he's incapable, but because he doesn't see things the same way. That never-ending task list we have in our minds, it just doesn't sit in a man's mind the same way. And there's actually science behind this. When women carry what researchers call the cognitive labor, the mental load of planning, remembering, anticipating, and managing household tasks before they even become problems. We're thinking 3 steps ahead. We notice when the laundry is piling up. We remember that the kids need new shoes. We plan meals around what needs to be used. We're running the household like a project manager. Men, on the other hand, on average, tend to do the tasks when asked. They'll wash the dishes, they'll do the laundry, but they're not necessarily thinking about what needs to happen next. They're not carrying that invisible load of planning and anticipation. Studies show that women with children spend about an hour or more per day on housework, while men with children spend about 30 minutes. But more than that, women are bearing the cognitive load. They're thinking, the planning, the remembering, and that's associated with higher rates of stress, burnout, and depression. My husband wasn't bad at managing the home. He just wasn't thinking about it the way I do, and that's not a personal failing on his part. It's just how our brains are wired differently. You kind of have to learn how to work with it. But then I was laid off from work and something shifted again. Suddenly, I was able to contribute back to the home in a way I hadn't been able to before, and I started to thrive. I started investigating food storage, using all parts of the animal, making rhythms for my home, cooking from scratch, planning seasonally, all the things I've been wanting to do for so long. And the more I got into these things, the more I started to crave them. I wanted to learn about herbs, about creating a home apothecary, about natural remedies and plant knowledge. But there was always this barrier in my mind. It all seemed so witchy, or like you had to be some yoga loving, green juice drinking person to do it. I didn't have faith in myself to work with herbs in that way. But I've kept learning and I keep exploring. And now I'm discovering that this knowledge, this skill, is something I want to pass to my kids. Not as something mystical or out of reach, but as something practical, something real, and something that connects us to our ancestors and to the earth. Now, here's where I want to kind of step back and look at what came before that shift. What came before convenience? What came before we decided that housemaking or homemaking wasn't as important? Mrs. Beeton wrote her famous book in the 1860s. And what's fascinating about her is that she was observing change during a time of everything changing in the Victorian era. She was watching innovation transform society and reflecting on what was being lost. She understood that homemaking isn't just about cooking and cleaning, it's about systems, it's about knowledge, it's about strategy and planning and care. But let me take you back even further, because the real wisdom comes from our ancestors. Look at ancestral cultures, indigenous tribes, village communities, pre-industrial societies. Go back thousands of years. In these cultures, women were the center of community life. They were decision makers, knowledge keepers. The home wasn't peripheral, it was central. Everything flowed from it. Women managed food. They knew which plants were edible, which ones healed, which ones could be stored for winter, and they managed medicine, creating remedies, passing down knowledge about herbs and healing. They managed education by teaching children not just academics, but skills, values, culture. And they managed the rhythms of the community with the celebrations, the gatherings, the rituals that held people together. And they passed down these skills across generations. They held the knowledge that kept communities alive. They were the keepers of culture, of tradition, of survival. And that work was valued. Everyone knew it. It was recognized as essential. It was sacred. That's the wisdom we've lost, not just the tasks of homemaking, but the understanding that this work matters, that it's skilled, that it's how communities survive and thrive. And if you look across different faith traditions, you see the same thread running through. In Christianity, the home is a place of spiritual growth. The table is where family gathers. Proverbs speaks of the woman who build her households with wisdom, and she's honored for it. Ephesians talk about family relationships as reflecting Christ's love, and the home as a place of refuge and spiritual growth. In Judaism, the home is where spiritual practice happens. The Shabbat, the weekly gathering around the table, is sacred. The woman lights the candles, sets the tone, creates the space, and every Friday night they sing The Woman of Valor, honoring the woman who tends the home. And in Islam, the home is viewed as sacred space, a dynamic family development center. Women are honored as the heart of the home and family. The domestic sphere is where Islamic values are transmitted, where children learn, where faith is lived. In Hinduism, there's a concept called Grihatha Dharma. It's one of the 4 sacred life stages. And managing a home and family isn't seen as inferior to monastic life or spiritual practice. It's a legitimate spiritual path. It's sacred duty. It's how you serve. And in indigenous traditions across the world, Women were often the keepers of knowledge, the center of community. Many tribes were matrilineal, inheritance and identity traced through women. Women's work, food preparation, agriculture, medicine, weaving was essential to survival and culture. It was honored. So, across Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, indigenous spirituality, and so on, the message is the same. The home and the woman tending it is the glue that holds everything together. It's not a burden, it's sacred work. And this brings me to something I want to go deeper on, the table. In my home, the table is where we gather, where we sit down together and eat food that I've made, where we listen to each other, where we have patience for one another, where everyone's voice has value. When you're sitting at the table, you're not scrolling, you're not consuming other people's stories, you're not in your own bubble, you're present with your people building your story. And that matters more than we realize, because the alternative is what we see everywhere now. Everyone in their own world, kids in their rooms with screens, adults scrolling endlessly, consuming the curated lives of others and strangers while their own families sit in silence. We're losing connection. We're losing the ability to sit with discomfort, to listen, to be bored enough to actually talk to each other. But here's what the research is showing us. When families eat together regularly, everything starts to change. Children and adolescents who share family meals 3 or more times per week are more likely to be a normal weight range and have healthier eating habits. They're less likely to struggle with eating disorders or obesity, but it goes so much deeper than that. Teens who have frequent family dinners get better grades. They have higher self-esteem. They're less likely to experience depression, anxiety, and stress. They're more likely to feel connected to their parents and their family, and they're less likely to engage in risky behaviors such as substance use, early sexual activity, behavioral issues, so on. Over 3 decades of research shows that regular family meals offer physical, social, emotional, and academic benefits. The more frequent the family meals, the better the emotional health. It's not just about nutrition. It's about connection. It's about being seen and heard by the people who matter most. And basically, this is where you start. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're wondering where to begin in reclaiming your home and your family rhythms, the table is it. This is the highest impact starting point. One meal, 3 or 4 times a week, that's what the research shows makes a difference. That's what shifts everything. The table is where you teach your kids to listen, where you model what it means to be present, where you build the bonds that will hold your family together. And yes, it takes time, it takes intention, it takes saying no to convenience sometimes, but it's worth it. The science backs it up, and your family's health depends on it. So what does this actually look like in real life, with work and kids and school and all the chaos? It's simple, it's not perfect, it's not Instagram worthy by any means, but it's intentional. My mornings, for example, are simple. I wake up, I shake off my bed covers, and make my bed. It takes maybe 2 minutes, but it sets the tone. The bed is made. The space is cared for. I open the windows around the house for 10 to 30 minutes, airing it out, though at the moment I'm wondering if it's worth it to battle with all the ladybirds that are living around my windows, but I do it anyway because fresh air matters. I might put a load of laundry on, move one from the dryer perhaps. Then I head to work. When I get home, I open the windows again, air the house out, then I tidy something, maybe clean a room, or I start on dinner depending on what time it is. But dinner is non-negotiable. It's made from scratch, seasonal, using ancestral foods, and we all sit at the table together, no exceptions. That's our rhythm. The only time we might break from this is if it's movie night, I got pizza, and we're on the couch as a family. But even then, we're together. And on weekends, I spend about an hour a day on cleaning. My husband and I might tackle specific chores together, or he'll be outside working on something while I'm managing the inside. The kids have their own rhythm too. An hour before bed, they tidy their rooms and prep for tomorrow. That's it. That's the practice. It's not about having a spotless home. It's not about being a perfect housewife or trad wife, whatever is trending at the moment. It's about participation. It's about tending to the space you share with intention. And when my kids see me doing this, when they see me caring for the home, cooking real food, sitting at the table, they start to understand. They start to take pride in their own space. They hang up their clothes, put their toys away, care for what's theirs. Not because I'm forcing them, but because they're learning. They're seeing what it looks like to tend to something, to care for it, and to take responsibility for it. So here's what I want you to understand. When you do these things, you're not just tending a home. You're not just cooking dinner or organizing a closet. You're honoring the hands that came before you. When I make pastry the way my Nan taught me, I'm connecting to her, to the kitchen, to the way she moved through the world with care and attention. When I cook seasonally, I'm connecting to my ancestors who had no choice but to eat what was available, who understood the rhythms of the earth, who built their lives around those rhythms. When I teach my kids to care for their space, I'm passing down something that's been passed down through generations, a way of being, a way of honoring what you have, and that's powerful. Because we live in a world that's trying to disconnect us from each other, from the earth, from our heritage, from the skills and knowledge that keep our ancestors alive. And every time you choose to do something with your hands instead of buying it, every time you cook from scratch instead of ordering takeout, and every time you sit at the table instead of scrolling, and every time you teach your kids to care about their space, you're saying no to that disconnection. You're saying, I remember, I know, and I'm keeping this alive. And that matters more than you know. Now, I know some of you listening and thinking, Caroline, I'm exhausted, I'm burned out, I'm barely keeping my head above water. How am I supposed to do all this? And I hear you. You've been told you can do it all, and you've been trying, and you're tired. I've been there too. And here's what I want you to know. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to choose between your career and your home, but you do have to choose something. Maybe you're letting the system choose for you, and the system is designed to keep you disconnected, dependent, and exhausted. So what if you choose differently? What if you made your bed tomorrow morning? Just that. One small act of tending to your space. What if you cooked one meal from scratch this week? Not a fancy meal, just something real, something you made with your hands. What if you sat at the table with your family for one meal without phones, just present? What if you taught your kids one small skill? How to fold laundry, how to wash a dish, how to care for their space. One thing. That's all I'm asking. Because when you do the one thing, you'll feel something shift. You'll remember what it feels like to be tending to something, to care for it, to be present, and then you'll want to do another thing and another. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because it feels right. Because you're remembering something you didn't know you'd forgotten. You're coming home. My mom created a home that felt safe, and my Nan taught me with gentleness and a smirk, and now I'm trying to do the same for my kids. I'm not perfect at it, and some days the house is chaos, and some days we eat breakfast for dinner, and some days I'm so tired I can barely think. But I keep showing up, I keep tending, and I keep sitting at the table. Because I know what I'm building. I'm not just organizing a home. I'm not just cooking dinner. I'm trying to keep something alive, something that's been passed down through generations, something that matters. And I believe you can too. This has been a quiet hallelujah, and I'm Caroline. Thank you again so much for sitting with me today. If this stirred something in you, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We release every Tuesday morning, and head over to aquiethallelujah.com to explore resources, join the newsletter, and connect with the community. Until next time, may you find God in the ordinary, and may your table be a place of thanksgiving. Bye.